am telling you this story because sometimes the greatest loves of your life, the children and grandchildren you raised with your own hands, can be the very ones who make you feel the deepest pain imaginable. For me, that pain began the day my grandson Edward looked at me with a cold, dismissive stare in front of the glass doors of the very company I had sacrificed my whole life to build. With that one look, he was practically saying, "There's no place for you here. This isn't your level." That day, I realized something. You can give your grandchild everything that money can buy, but you can never buy them the sense of where they come from. What he didn't know was that in turning me away, he wasn't just shutting out his grandmother. He was sending away the true, silent owner of the very seat he was so proudly sitting in. It had been 30 years since the day I encouraged my son Charles, Edward's father, to set up that tiny packaging workshop. Back then, it was nothing but a dream. A small typewriter, a modest bank loan, and the enormous, genuine fire burning inside all of us. Charles, my late husband William, and I packed every box, wrapped every order with our own hands, laying the first bricks, brick by loving brick, of the company that would one day become a major conglomerate. When we formalized the business, William and I decided to place most of the capital into a family trust for the sake of our children and future generations. The majority of the company's shares, along with a permanent seat on the board, would be safeguarded through a special class, my personal Class A shares that could only be exercised with my signature. It was our quiet safety lock, a way to ensure that the head of the family could always intervene if the business strayed into moral or financial danger, even while allowing Charles and young Edward to shine at the forefront. But when Charles, intelligent like his father, yet blinded by the arrogance that early success often brings, handed over the rapidly growing company to Edward, I watched with pain as my grandson dismissed the old stories of that typewriter and my silent role in all of it. The young man had grown into a coarse shadow under the artificial lights of being the CEO of a large corporation. The wealth handed to him felt, in his eyes, like a birthright rather than a responsibility. For the past year, rumors had reached me that the company, particularly those new technology investments I could hardly pronounce, was not performing as well as expected, and yet neither Charles nor Edward bothered to inform me, the oldest partner and the principal shareholder, of the worrying situation. As if I were nothing more than a harmless old ornament, something to be smiled at from afar, irrelevant to the empire I had helped build. When Margaret, Charles's secretary and the daughter of my own former secretary, handed me an invitation she had secretly slipped into her handbag, I stared for a long time at the gleaming official paper. It detailed a supposedly critical meeting about a foreign partnership agreement that would define the company's future. And yet, strangely enough, my name, the name registered on the majority shares, was nowhere to be found. Not among the invited attendees, not even in the agenda. My company, my honor, William's legacy, unraveling like a riddle behind my back. The quiet worry inside me solidified into an icy, unshakable resolve. If Edward thought he was just hiding numbers, he was wrong. He was showing me that he had not only become an abrasive young man, but an executive drifting away from ethics. And this deal threatened the oldest, strongest branch of the business, my branch. My grandson's choice to conceal this partnership from me and from the long-standing board members was not merely disrespectful. It was an unforgivable betrayal of the integrity and trust upon which the company had been built. In that moment, I felt the power I had guarded in silence for decades shift within me. No longer a shield, but a sword I was now obliged to draw. Their attempts to ignore me and exclude me cut deeply. But I was not someone who collapsed under the weight of pain. Quite the opposite. That wound told me it was time to press the button, to remind every wall of that company that each success echoing through its corridors still carried the fingerprints of my workshop, my hands, and my quiet strength. On the morning of that fateful meeting, as I left my home wearing that dark silk dress, I knew it wasn't just elegance I was putting on. It was the quiet declaration of the woman who had built that company from nothing, the strength, dignity, and unshakable resolve of someone who had never asked permission from anyone. It was the outfit of a woman who had come not to beg, but to take her rightful place. As the taxi approached the towering headquarters, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. The gleaming glass and steel structure looked so cold, so foreign, standing there on the ashes of what had once been a humble workshop and a shared dream. A small voice inside me whispered that this place was no longer the warm family hearth it once was. It had become a merciless arena where money and power ruled, and where old souls with sentimental memories like me no longer had a place. When the young, fashionable receptionist in the lobby caught sight of me, the mixture of surprise and subtle condescension on her face reminded me of something important. I was not there as a visitor. I was there as someone whose authority could not be questioned. I might not have worn a company badge, but I held the company's spirit, its history, and, most importantly, its future. The few seconds I stood before the heavy wooden doors of the boardroom felt like the most critical moment in 30 years. Behind that door, my grandson and the others were gambling with my legacy without even mentioning my name. And by opening that door, I was not merely walking into a meeting. I was about to teach them all a harsh lesson that real power does not lie in titles, but in ownership and silent control. When I quietly pushed the door open and stepped inside, every conversation stopped at once. I saw the look on Edward's face, first shock, then that insolent flicker of anger that comes from suddenly losing control. To him, I was an unexpected stain across the flawless, polished painting he imagined the business world to be. The way he rushed to contain the situation in front of the foreign partners, clumsy, hurried, almost panicked, was painful proof of how far he had strayed. As he walked toward me, the disdain in his eyes suggested he believed I was some confused elderly woman who had taken a wrong turn and wandered in by mistake, and that he now had to tidy up the embarrassment. When he leaned in and whispered, in a low but threatening tone, "Grandmother, this isn't the time or the place. This is an important business meeting. Go and wait outside. We'll talk later." The hurt inside me hardened into a deep, searing disappointment. At that moment, I realized he no longer saw me as the woman who had supported his father, who had worked and sweated to build the very foundations beneath his feet. To him, I was merely an old relative to be hidden away, a source of embarrassment. But I had not come there simply to attend a meeting. I had come to remind him and everyone else in that room that the chairs they were sitting on, the table they were gathered around, and the very company they were discussing existed because of my silent wealth, my presence, my ownership, my power. These were the quiet, sharp blades cutting directly into his arrogance and indifference. When my grandson tried to grab my arm and usher me out, I said only 2 words, delivered with the deep, quiet authority I had carried for decades. "Sit down, Edward." The unshakable power in my voice swallowed the noise and arrogance in the room at once. Even the foreign partners must have realized in that moment that this elderly woman was the beginning of a storm far stronger than they had anticipated. The expression on Edward's face, anger laced with a flicker of panic, proved that no one had ever spoken to him in that tone before. He had grown so accustomed to standing at the center of what he believed was immense power that it had never occurred to him that his grandmother, the original source of everything, could pose the slightest threat. I pulled out a chair and took my place directly at the center of the long boardroom table, right beside his inflated sense of authority. In doing so, I didn't merely occupy a seat. I brought the company's founding principles, its ethics, and its true ownership back to the table. His crude attempt to cast me out had been merely an inconvenience. Instead of apologizing to the foreign partners for the scene, I simply said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Forgive us. We had a minor family disagreement over authority. We may proceed now." The cool, professional tone of my voice made it abundantly clear that I was not a visitor, but a decisive player in the fate of their investment. Throughout the meeting, Edward sat beside me trembling with frustration. And this was not merely a personal victory. It was irrefutable proof that the empire he believed he'd built rested on foundations far more fragile than he imagined, and that true power still lived within the older, quieter generation. He wanted me out of the room. Instead, I made it clear I would remain and listen to every detail of the agreement he had tried so desperately to hide. As the foreign partners began their presentation, I focused intently on the specifics of the proposal, the very deal Edward was recklessly pushing. The more I listened, the more my concerns were confirmed. The new technology investment was a risky gamble with the company's core capital, threatening its long-term stability. Youthful ambition had steamrolled right over seasoned caution. At the most critical point of the presentation, I raised my hand and with a calm yet piercing tone asked, "I need to understand how this investment impacts the security funds attached to the existing Class A shareholders and what guarantees are in place to protect those reserves." The room fell silent, not only at the mention of a share class, but at the unmistakable weight of the reminder that I held the majority of those shares. Edward's face drained of color. He leaned toward the foreign partners, desperate to silence the matter, whispering, "Grandmother, we don't need to discuss those details." His reaction proved everything. He had concealed this deal from me. He knew the risks, and he knew exactly how dangerous it was to the company's moral and financial foundation.
The foreign partner's stammering response to my critical financial question, paired with his refusal to meet Edward's eyes, made it clear that this agreement was not merely financially reckless. It also proved that my grandson had acted far beyond his authority. In that moment, everyone seated at that table began to understand that I was not just an elderly grandmother. I was the true owner, the unseen force behind the company's most protected financial structures. With complete composure, I opened my handbag and placed on the table the old, time-worn document William and I had signed decades ago, the one confirming my control over the company's Class A privileged shares. That document did not belong in this polished, modern boardroom. It carried the scent of typewriter ink, sweat, and the humble workshop from which everything had begun. It was a relic, but also the purest symbol of absolute ownership. The look on Edward's face when he saw it, shock fused with a sense of betrayal, told me that even his father, Charles, had never fully explained the final silent authority I held. He had never understood the limits of his power, and now he realized that the throne he had sat upon with such arrogance had always rested on ground controlled entirely by me. Turning to the foreign partners, I said, "This agreement poses an irresponsible threat to the corporate risk and security reserves, and I must inform you that these funds cannot be moved without my signature." This wasn't a threat, it was a financial fact. And in that instant, the paper tower Edward had built with ambition and vanity began to tremble under the weight of a single sentence. The pain I felt as I looked at him publicly in that room full of outsiders was not just disappointment. It was the crushing awareness that my unconditional love had been poisoned by his uncontrollable arrogance and moral drift. At that moment, I understood the lesson I needed to teach him, that the power of money means nothing when confronted by the power of ethics, memory, and roots. I leaned toward him and whispered, "When you tried to push me out of that door, Edward, you weren't just pushing aside a grandmother. You were pushing out the first typewriter, the first delivery van, the first drop of sweat this company was built on. And the price of that mistake will not come from my signature. It will come from your pride." In his eyes I saw it, a flash of justified fear. The foreign partners, shaken by my sharp financial warning, immediately reached for their phones to call their solicitors. That alone meant the agreement had collapsed. Instantly, irrevocably. The silence that followed was the clearest evidence of how a single stroke of my pen could shatter months of their planning and millions in projected gains. When I rose from the table and walked out of that room, the wrecked plans, the crushed arrogance, and the financial chaos I left behind were not acts of revenge. They were a necessary operation for the future of the company. That day, I proved to my grandson that the true owner of a legacy, whatever title others may hold, is always the one who remains loyal to honesty and to their roots.
As I walked out of the company lobby, I saw not only surprise in the young receptionist's eyes, the same girl who had quietly warned me about the meeting, but also a hint of admiration and discreet support. In that moment, it comforted me to realize that even within corporate corruption, there were still young people who valued honesty and respected their roots. The moment I stepped into the car, the first thing I did was call my son, Charles. The panic in his voice made it clear that news of Edward's attempt to throw me out and the abrupt collapse of the agreement had already reached him. "Charles," I said, "no major decision in this company can be made without your signature or mine. The title you gave your son ended up greater than the lessons you taught him." I could hear the guilt in his silence. His attempt to defend Edward, to justify his youth and ambition, meant nothing to me. I was young once too, Charles, but I never gambled with your fathers and my wealth. What you should have taught him is that money is just a tool, and that the honor passed down through a family is always the greatest capital. The humiliation I endured when Edward tried to push me out of that building was not merely a personal insult. It was the struggle of a mother and a leader fighting to restore the values and moral compass that had been lost. My actions were necessary to force them to remember the most fundamental truth about that business and that family. Everything had begun with a dream rooted in love and honesty. When I returned home, the tension and chaos of the meeting slowly began to fade from my body. I picked up an old photograph of William. I wished he were still with me so he wouldn't have to witness this bleak portrait of arrogant youth and forgotten values. We had once promised each other that money would never be allowed to overshadow family bonds or integrity. His smiling face reminded me that the true soul of the company had never been forged in glass towers or million-pound deals. It had been created in that tiny workshop with our shared dream. William always said that money was merely a vehicle, that real wealth was reputation and family love. And now, even if through the harshest lesson, I was obliged to teach this philosophy to our grandson. That night, I ignored the many calls from Charles and the insolent text from Edward. "What do you think you're doing?" Their panic didn't matter to me. What mattered was the long-term reckoning this incident would force them into. I hadn't just reclaimed their financial integrity, I had canceled their moral shortcuts, and now they would have to sit with that lesson. The board seal resting in my palm felt both a responsibility and a reassurance. It was a silent reminder that I carried not only ownership rights, but the duty to protect the family's moral compass. Edward's crude attempt to expel me was not about my pride. It was about securing the future of the family business. When I woke the next morning, I didn't feel the chaos of the previous day's battle. Instead, I felt a deep, cold calm, something I hadn't known for years. As I watched the financial news on television and saw the fluctuations in the company's shares, I knew one thing. The consequences of a righteous act were far more important than temporary financial losses. This tremor was necessary, an opportunity to rebuild the company on stronger foundations. When the doorbell rang and Charles burst into the room with panic and exhaustion etched across his face, I saw instantly that the fallout from yesterday had reached him in full force. "Mom, what have you done?" he cried. "The foreign partners have pulled out completely. The shares are dropping." I simply said, "Sit down, Charles. Let's have a cup of tea." His panic only confirmed how right my resolve had been. He threw the folders in his hands onto the table. "Edward made a terrible mistake. He provoked you, I know that, but we never imagined you'd take such a drastic step." I looked at him and replied, "You didn't teach your son what he needed to know, Charles, so I had to teach him. A leader's authority comes not from a title, but from the capital they control and the integrity they uphold. Now drink your tea and tell me honestly about the real risks of that agreement and the details Edward hid from you." At that moment, Charles realized that I hadn't merely defended a grandmother's pride. I had reestablished the family's fundamental covenant of honesty. There was nothing left to conceal. When he admitted that the deal involved using some of the company's oldest and most secure properties as collateral, assets built from William's sweat and meant to safeguard the family for generations, the pain inside me deepened. My grandson hadn't just gambled with my money. He had jeopardized the very foundations his grandfather had laid. "Stop, Charles," I said quietly. "Don't explain how you allowed such a risk or how you forgot that I am the majority shareholder. Instead, tell me how Edward acquired this arrogance. Tell me when you stopped teaching him that great power can lead a man away from honesty. Because for me, the real issue was not the money, it was the corruption of character." I took my son's hand. "I am your mother, Charles. I would never harm you or Edward, but I am also the first leader of this company. And a leader, no matter how painful it is, must remove whatever part of the body spreads disease. What I did yesterday didn't just cancel the agreement, it stripped Edward of the reckless power that was poisoning him. Now go," I said firmly. "Speak to your son. Tell him that until he faces the consequences of his actions, his authority in this company is temporarily suspended. It is the only way he will learn both the law and respect." At that moment, Charles finally understood that I would do whatever it took to save the company and the family from the destruction caused by him and his son.
When Charles left the house, he didn't just walk away with a folder and a list of difficult decisions. He also left behind the fragile possibility that the strained relationship between father and son, the bond he and Edward had all but broken, might finally begin to rebuild through the severity of the lesson I had forced upon them. I knew that Edward would learn this lesson best not from me, but from the one man he loved and respected most, his father. Immediately afterwards, I called our solicitor, the one who handled the company's legal affairs and who had once been William's closest friend. I explained Edward's reckless actions and the legal steps that needed to be taken to safeguard the company's future. At this stage, it could no longer remain a sentimental family dispute. It had to become a cold, systematic corporate restoration. He confirmed what I already knew, that in cases of such an abuse of delegated authority, I, as the privileged Class A shareholder, had the full right to freeze Edward's powers entirely. This was not merely a financial intervention. It was a legal demonstration of how disrespectfully that arrogant young man had treated the legacy of his father and grandfather. That night, under Charles's authority, but with my direction, I personally drafted the agenda for an emergency board meeting. The sole item was revocation of high-risk financial commitments executed without Class A shareholder approval and protection of corporate security reserves. This would make it unmistakably clear to Edward and to those who enabled him exactly who the true authority was and what corporate ethics really meant. The next day, as I walked through the company's doors with my solicitor beside me and Charles trailing behind with a face full of remorse, I was not the elderly relative who had been shoved aside. I was the figure returning to restore order. When the young receptionist bowed her head respectfully, it became evident that yesterday's display of arrogance had already dissolved into something belonging to the past. When we entered Edward's luxurious office, we found him alone at his desk, his expression dark, bewildered, and bruised with comprehension. Charles had clearly told him everything that had transpired the previous day. My return was not a warning, it was a legal reality. For the first time, he understood that his grandmother's authority was not merely financial, but corporate and lawful. As Charles read out the board's resolution, his voice trembling under the weight of both paternal duty and executive responsibility, I saw a flash of anger in Edward's eyes. But it quickly transformed into complete helplessness. In that moment, his glossy office ceased to be a center of power. It became a cold courtroom in which he was forced to confront the consequences of his arrogance. I didn't say a single word to him. Instead, I looked past him at the portrait of his grandfather, William, hanging on the wall behind him. The painting seemed to look directly at Edward, as if silently telling him, "This company is a legacy, not a gambling hall." And my silence became the deepest punishment of all. For Edward feared one thing far more than disappointing me. He feared disappointing the grandfather whose memory he had always idealized.
At the board meeting, as I sat at the head of the table, I felt none of the coldness or distance that had haunted this room before. On the contrary, this was exactly where the founder of a company born from a tiny workshop naturally belonged. The respect and caution in the eyes of the other members made it clear that I had not only prevented a financial scandal, but had revived the company's institutional memory and ethical backbone. I asked my solicitor to read, in precise legal terminology, the potential risks that the agreement Edward had signed posed to the company's corporate security reserves. Every sentence, every financial clause struck the room like a blade.
irrefutable evidence of how disastrously far my grandson's recklessness could have taken us. In that moment, everyone understood that my actions were not an act of personal revenge, but a corporate necessity. Addressing the board, I said, "I am the founder of this company, I am the head of this family, and I will not allow the future of either to be handed over to ambition or arrogance. This decision will result in Edward's powers being suspended, but it will also protect us from similar risks in the future." When the resolution was passed unanimously, the sorrow etched across Charles's face was the deepest punishment for me. But I knew this harsh lesson was necessary for both him and Edward to understand that power and money must always be accompanied by responsibility. That day, a grandmother delivered the hardest yet most essential lesson of a young man's life. I imagined Edward's expression as the decision was read to him, that profound helplessness, that defeated pride. For me, the point was never to dismiss him from his position. What mattered was ensuring that his arrogance and unchecked authority were curtailed by law and by the family's governance. This lesson was more valuable than any financial loss he might suffer in his career, because it would teach him that life is not a game of chance. As I signed the meeting minutes, my hand did not tremble. I knew that my decisive action had come purely from love and the instinct to protect. I had saved my grandson from being crushed beneath the very tower of pride he had built with his own hands. Like a mother administering the bitterest medicine, I had done what was necessary. I handed Charles a handwritten note I had prepared for Edward. In it, I wrote, "Life does not begin when you are thrown out of a meeting. It begins when you learn from your mistakes." It was the final lesson I would give him, not just as a grandmother, but as a mentor. I knew the disappointment would sting him deeply, but I also knew this setback would one day make him stronger. As I signed the meeting minutes, my hand did not tremble. I knew that my decisive action had come purely from love and the instinct to protect. I had saved my grandson from being crushed beneath the very tower of pride he had built with his own hands. Like a mother administering the bitterest medicine, I had done what was necessary. I handed Charles a handwritten note I had prepared for Edward. In it, I wrote, "Life does not begin when you are thrown out of a meeting. It begins when you learn from your mistakes." It was the final lesson I would give him, not just as a grandmother, but as a mentor. I knew the disappointment would sting him deeply, but I also knew this setback would one day make him stronger.
In the weeks that followed the great crisis, I felt a sense of inner peace I hadn't known in years. As I tended to the flowers in my garden, I realized, just as with the company's tangled affairs, that pruning away the overgrown, tangled branches was essential for new, healthy growth. Life, after all, was never just about running a company. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found my grandson, Edward, head bowed, standing beside his father, Charles. His face was heavy with remorse. For me, that moment was worth more than any victory in a boardroom. It was not the day I sent him out of that meeting that marked my triumph, but this moment, when he came to face the consequences of his own arrogance.
He looked at me and said, "Grandmother, I know I showed you terrible disrespect. I forgot your true role in the company, your strength, and more importantly, the sweat you poured into building everything I inherited. You didn't just push me out of a meeting, you taught me a lesson." As he spoke, the ice around my heart began to melt. I handed him a cup of tea and said, "I can forgive your disrespect toward me, Edward, but never forget the irresponsibility and dishonesty you showed toward the company your grandfather and I built. A leader's power does not come from a title, but from character and the ethics they protect." In that moment, I felt the tension between us shift, giving way to honesty and to the possibility of a new beginning. Edward apologized again and again for his behavior, but to me it was more than a grandson's remorse. It was proof that family honor and respect could still overcome the arrogance money had planted in him. At last, I could see the decent young man beneath the shell of pride he had worn for so long. Charles looked at me and said quietly, "Mum, you were right. I gave Edward a powerful title, but not the responsibility that must come with it. Your intervention saved both him and the company." His honesty washed away the sting of the day I had been pushed out of that meeting. I showed Edward an old yellowed photograph, the one where he stood as a toddler in my arms, inside the small workshop where William once dreamed aloud. "Look here, Edward," I said. "This company wasn't born in fancy boardrooms. It was built in this workshop, with love and hard work. What you forgot wasn't the details of that agreement. It was the spirit of this photograph." Then I added, "Now go, read the board's decision again, but this time not as a document of defeat. Read it as the second chance you've been given. This company is your future, but only if you run it with the honesty and humility your grandfather lived by." Edward nodded, eyes glassy, but determined. He understood. At last. Edward's return to the company was not, for me, the return of a defeated young man, but the rise of a new leader shaped by a new philosophy. He was no longer the arrogant youth stepping out of a luxury car. He was now a humbled and responsible manager, shaped by a harsh but necessary lesson from his grandmother. The first decision we made as a board was to suspend his executive powers temporarily and implement a mentorship and development plan, requiring him to work across every department of the company, starting from the very bottom. If he was to rediscover the foundation his grandfather had laid, he would not learn it in a plush CEO's office, but among the workers who upheld the company's true spirit. In our discussions with the foreign partners, I made it clear that the cancellation of the agreement had stemmed from Edward's overreach of authority and from ethical violations that conflicted with our corporate values. This was not only a financial decision, it was an act of protecting the company's honor. Everyone understood that this holding valued integrity far above money. That day, as I sat in my garden beside William's photograph, I felt a deep, quiet peace, the peace of a mother and grandmother who, even when faced with the hardest decisions, had acted out of love and a commitment to what was right. I had not merely expelled my grandson from a meeting, I had saved both him and the company from their own collapse.
When Edward began working in the workshops, the very heart of the factory his grandfather had once built, standing shoulder to shoulder with the workers, it became the greatest restoration moment of all. He was no longer the entitled CEO in a luxury office. He had become a man relearning the value of labor, humility, and sweat. This would be the greatest inheritance I could ever give him. Around that time, I came across an old letter he had written to me as a child. In it, he had scribbled, "When I grow up, I want to be a leader like Granddad." And in that moment, I realized his arrogance had always been an illusion. Beneath it, the same decent, hard-working child still existed. My harsh lesson had only stripped away the pride that drowned him. One evening over dinner, Charles looked at me and said, "Mum, Edward has changed. He's humble now, respectful, and he's rediscovered his grandfather's philosophy. Your decision, it brought him back to the right path." His words finally closed the wound that had been aching inside me for so long. For the next board meeting, I updated the agenda myself, and for the first time since the crisis, I wrote Edward's name again, reinstated member of the board. His powers remained temporarily limited, but he was returning as a stronger, wiser, and far more mature leader. The lesson I had given him, painful though it was, had finally borne fruit.
When Edward returned to the board meeting, the man who walked into that room was no longer the arrogant young executive I had once expelled. He was someone transformed, shaped by the lessons of his mistakes, carrying a new vision and the humility of a true leader. He had finally learned the value not only of wealth, but of people, labor, and responsibility. For me, that alone repaired all the shame and pain of that fateful meeting. At the end of the session, Edward turned to me and said, "Grandmother, thank you for giving me this second chance. More importantly, thank you for teaching me that a CEO's true duty isn't just to make profit, but to uphold a moral compass." In that moment, my heart filled with a quiet and profound peace. I looked around at the board members and said, "The mistakes of my son and grandson have reminded us all that our company's philosophy has never been solely about financial success. From this day forward, we will walk into the future with stronger ethics, greater honesty, and deeper integrity." When I signed the board resolution that day, my signature did far more than ratify a corporate decision. It sealed the restoration of a family and a company rediscovering its lost values. On that day, I taught my grandson who the true leader was, not with pride, but with truth. Later, Edward took me to the commemorative plaque erected where his grandfather William's first workshop once stood. For me, that moment was the peak of peace and restoration. On the plaque, alongside William's name, were the words that had guided us from the beginning: honor in labor, integrity in leadership. Edward turned to me and said, "Grandmother, When I was sent out of that meeting, I didn't just lose the dignity of a CEO. I regained the philosophy you and Granddad built this company on. That is worth more to me than any title or profit. His honesty softened my heart once again. I took his hand and told him, "Life does not end when you are thrown out of a meeting, my dear boy. Life begins when you learn from your mistakes and return to your roots. From today onward, you are not merely a CEO. You are the guardian of your grandfather's and my legacy of honesty." That day, I handed Edward my seat on the board and outlined the next steps he would take as the designated privileged shareholder. I would remain the overseer, the silent steward who would intervene only when necessary. And on that day, I taught my grandson one final truth. Power is not a title. Power is responsibility, entrusted to those who understand its weight.
In the days following the Great Crisis, I experienced some of the most peaceful and meaningful moments of my life. As I leafed through old photo albums, the small workshop William and I had built came alive before me, not merely as a place of business, but as the fortress of our family and our values. The day I was crudely cast out of that meeting hall became, in hindsight, the moment of my greatest liberation. Now, sitting in my garden with a cup of tea, I know with certainty that the true leader, whatever title they hold, is the one who preserves their integrity and honor. Edward's arrogance had never been a matter of my pride. It was a threat to the future of both my family and the company. Protecting those was not a choice, it was a duty. Later that afternoon, I received a message from Edward. "Grandmother, after today's board meeting, I visited Granddad's old workshop. For the first time, I truly felt the philosophy you and he built this company upon." And in that moment, I realized that the lesson I had given him was not merely a financial correction. It was the passing of a legacy from one generation to the next. Never forget, love and honesty are the greatest wealth a family can possess. And sometimes we must teach the ones we love the hardest lessons in the hardest ways. But in the end, those lessons help them and us recognize who the true leader really is. That sunset was not merely the end of another day. It was the gentle closure of the most difficult chapter of my life. When I expelled my grandson from that meeting, I was not punishing him. I was rescuing him from the darkness of his own pride and from the destruction he was unknowingly building. And that, to me, was worth more than any title or fortune I had ever earned. In the letter I gave him, I taught him more than how to lead. I taught him how to be human. Life is not merely about making mistakes. It is about learning from them and finding your way back to your roots. On that day, I showed my grandson who the true guardian of the company was, and that the real strength behind our holding had always rested in my quiet love and unwavering honesty. Never forget, pride is the greatest enemy of all. And sometimes, breaking the pride of those we love is the greatest act of love we can give them. That day,
I was no longer the grandmother who had been pushed out of a meeting. I became the quiet custodian, the matrix who recalibrated the moral compass of her family and her company. My story ends here, but the story of my grandson and of the company moves forward toward a new, honest, and hopeful beginning shaped by the hard lesson I gave him. And for me, that made every pain and every disappointment worth it.